Greetings and salutations, and thank you for clicking on the video. Today we're going to take a look at KDE on Linux Mint. This is the latest version of the Linux Mint operating system to be officially released. It is Linux Mint 18 with the KDE desktop environment, also known as the Plasma desktop environment. Already on this channel we have taken a look at a Linux Mint with XFCE and Mate and Cinnamon, so I figured we'd go ahead and talk a little bit about this version as well. I installed and played around with the KDE Neon distribution of Linux, which is the KDE project's very own distribution featuring the Plasma desktop and all of the lovely KDE environment applications, and I was quite impressed with it. I have never been a fan of KDE up until I played with it this last time around, and it actually performed quite well, and I enjoyed working with it quite a bit. So, you come to the download page here for Linux Mint, choose your poison, whichever flavor you'd like, and then click on this little link here to get to a list of mirrors where you can download Linux Mint for yourself. Somebody posted a comment and said, why don't you ever tell people about checking the MD5 checksums? You can do that if you like, but for those who are brand new to Linux, I pretty much trust the Linux Mint team enough that I'm pretty sure that you're going to get a nice clean image. But if you want to be extra careful, you can definitely look up how to do that for sure. So I always like to show how you get it and where it comes from. This is just linuxmint.com for anybody who comes along and sees the video and wonders where they can get their own version. So let's jump over here and we will actually boot up Linux Mint 18 with the KDE desktop, and you can see how it boots and what it looks like as it logs in. I do have this configured to automatically log in. This is not exactly as it comes when you install it. I have tweaked the fonts and the theme just a little bit as I ordinarily do, but it's pretty close. And if you did see that video I did about KDE Neon, then you're probably going to recognize what I did to it. Boots relatively quickly. I think this actually boots up a little bit faster than the KDE Neon version, the KDE's very own distribution based on Ubuntu 16.04. And it is configuring the desktop, and pretty soon here we should actually see a desktop. Do keep in mind that this is running in a virtual machine, and also keep in mind that I'm capturing video, so tends to slow things down just a little bit. So this is what the desktop looks like. I did add this widget, which is the widget that gives you the folder view so you can get to files and folders that you would store on your desktop. You get the welcome screen, which is pretty much the same for all Linux Mint flavors, so I'm not going to jump too much into that. Get the lovely kicker menu here, which is actually one of the most awesome menus in the entire Linux ecosystem. I have to say that I do like it an awful lot. We have a few favorites that are already in here. The file manager is up top. That is Dolphin in KDE. And, whoa, them icons is huge. They give you this nice adjustment down here. You can make your icons any size that you like. And one of the things, if you have been using something like a GNOME desktop, or maybe you've been using Cinnamon or some other distribution of Linux, I mentioned this in the last video, and all the KDE folks were quick to point out that you could change it, is that it's a single click to open up a folder. So if I just want to open up the desktop folder, see, I clicked it once and it opened right up. You can change that, yes. Now, I left it alone because I was just trying to get used to the way it worked. Not a big deal to me. If you notice when I hover my icon over here that we get this little plus that shows up there, that's how you can just highlight a folder in there. Dolphin has a lot of great features into it. You can switch the previews off here. You can split it. So you could have this side going to different folders. That's very nice. Not tabs, it splits. And there's a big difference. Having it in tabs is not that much of a help, because usually you're trying to drag files back and forth or compare things in different folders. By the way, as we're talking about this, these are folders, but if you're in a terminal, we call the same thing a directory. A directory is nothing more than a file that contains a bunch of files. So when they came up with the wonderful GUI programs to handle files and directories, they started calling them folders, because in computer science class, back in the days before there were GUIs, and I remember this, that's how they taught us what they were. They said, well, a directory is like a folder that holds more files. So there you go. So what else do we have here? We've got Firefox, which is the default browser. And then we have the Personal Information Manager, which handles a lot of things, including your email. So I did, I think I ran the import tool from Thunderbird because I installed Thunderbird first. Let's just go ahead and just full size that and see what we got going on. Look at mail. So this, no, this isn't really set up at this point, but that's what it looks like. It'll do a whole bunch of stuff here. You got a calendar and a mail and stuff like Kmail, what that used to be called. I have Thunderbird installed on the machine. I always go ahead and throw Thunderbird on and put the configuration files in whenever I set up a VM. And also I do the same thing for Firefox. So if I open up Firefox here, you're going to see that it doesn't look anything like the default Firefox, because it has my extensions and all that stuff, and it will come up to the Mozilla start page. So, yeah. No, I don't know whether Google Chrome renders properly in this, because it's running in a virtual machine, and as a rule I don't install Chrome in virtual machines. To install software on the machine, get some new stuff here. We have the Linux Mint Software Manager, which pretty much looks and acts the same way as it does on every other version of Linux Mint. We have a terminal, and that terminal is console. That is set as the default. And we can see how much memory this is taking up. Well, let me switch back over here. So basically, with all the things that I have opened up and closed now, it is 710 megabytes of physical memory taken up. And we got some that swapped out as well. This is a virtual machine, so it's got basically 1 gigabyte of memory available to it. And it's running pretty well for such kind of a low-end machine here. Yeah, I know there's a process running. Close the terminal. Thank you. So, this is what the Mint Software Manager looks like. It's really easy to use. So let's say that you wanted to install the Chromium browser. Do a search. There you go, Chromium, which is kind of the open sourced version of Google Chrome. And yes, there is a difference. The Google Chrome browser does contain some proprietary code. Most of it is open source, but it has some Google tweaks in it. The Chromium browser does not contain those Google tweaks. The functionality is pretty much the same, though. And yes, you can use Chromium to get into your Google account. So which one you use is entirely up to you. Then we have the system settings, which in KDE are awesome. They are intricate. You can really change this desktop into whatever you want it to be. So the first one we're going to look at here is Workspace Theme, because I did change that. It comes with Breeze, and then I changed it over here to Breeze Dark. And there are people who complain that I like dark. You know, I do like dark themes. And if you don't like it, well, sorry, don't install it on your machine. Thank you. And we can actually go in and edit these colors if we want to, which is very cool. We can really customize the fonts, choose the anti-aliasing that you want, set the DPI for the entire desktop environment, and then you can change icons, play around with them, get new icon themes if you like. I've left it as it came installed. Usually I put GNOME icons on any desktop I'm on if I can, because I just like them. They're gaudy. I know that's kind of sacrilegious. And here we have application styles, which allows you to theme up your GTK applications, which is really interesting. It handles Qt and GTK differently, and so therefore I've set this to Breeze, and you can play around with that. You can have them themed up differently if you like. That's one of the complaints that I have with a lot of other desktops, is that they, if the desktop is based on Qt, the Qt apps look great. You can scale the fonts and you can change it around. But then when you run something that's GTK based, it doesn't look great, or vice versa. I mean, like GNOME, every version of the GNOME desktop, GNOME 3 that I have played around with, I've always come up against that, where the GNOME apps look great and GTK looks like crap, and then I have to go searching for tools, and I have to try and figure out how to integrate those GTK or those Qt apps in there better in a GNOME environment. Well, the KDE folks have made that relatively easy because it's already here. We have desktop behavior, and here's where you can set all kinds of things like screen locking. This is where you can really customize this desktop. You can make it the single click like we were talking about before. You can make the desktop active because it's not 100% active as far as like having files and folders on it. That's why I put this little guy right here, and this just shows files and folder in the desktop. But it's not an inactive desktop by any stretch of the imagination. It definitely has lots of functionality, but it just by the settings usually don't allow you to show what's in the desktop folder on the desktop. So we've got window management here, and these applications just go on and on and on. If you have ever played with OpenSUSE, then this looks and acts a lot like the YAST tool in OpenSUSE. So you can really, really, really set this thing up to do some interesting things. It's worth mentioning the sound. Some people have a lot of problem dealing with the sound in the Plasma environment, and essentially what you do is you set the sound settings for all of the applications that you're using. And so there's a lot of deep settings here, and if you're not really familiar with how sound works on a computer, it's real easy to get lost. It even took me a little while to do that, and that's something that I actually know a great deal about. But once you get it configured and you get it where you want it, it stays where you want it, which is nice. Whereas like the Pulse audio controllers that you get in some GNOME-based desktops, they tend to be a little flaky, and you get it set up the way you want it, and then you unplug a device from a USB or something and it changes. Whereas it seems that the Plasma environment, it remembers how you want certain applications and devices to work, which is pretty cool. So that is a really quick basic tour of this desktop environment. And we will take a quick look here at the applications that are installed, because unlike KDE Neon, which comes with very few applications, the Mint folks have given us some stuff to look at here. Most of these do come from the KDE environment. So just giving you a basic set of applications. Let's see what we've got for internet. We got IRC, we got a mail client. I'm just curious what that is. Yeah, it's just the mail. I guess the Personal Information Center just pulls in Kmail, because that's what this is. It's the same thing we looked at before. Where were we? That's pretty basic stuff there. So we can go back here and take a look at what else we have installed. Amarak is the audio player. That's been in the KDE environment for years. We have a disk burner, which is K3B. Very nice disk burner indeed. VLC is installed. And I guess this is the kind of default KDE video player there. So definitely plenty to work with. I actually would only need the disk burner and VLC. And of course, things like Simple Screen Recorder. I need KDE Live. I need a few other things. But for just basic playing around. Okay, so we have lots of things under Office. Pretty much the entire LibreOffice suite and some other things included there. And quite a bit of tools installed under here under System. I installed HTOP. That's something that I wanted. Now, the way I like to set these menus up, and the Whisker menu in XFCE is the same way, is that they will tell you what the application does. I'd rather have the name of the application be up top. That is easily changed. So let's go ahead and change that. So just right-click here. It's in here somewhere. I found it for sure. You can configure all kinds of things here. Let's look under toolbars. It's in here somewhere. Now I can't seem to find out where I set that setting before. Well, we're on the menu editor. That's probably why. Oh, here we go. Show applications by name. And apply. Okay. Now we get them listed with the name of the application first, which is what I like. But anyway, you get the idea. Everything is totally configurable here. You can make this desktop do all kinds of stuff. So, that's pretty much all I'm going to get into. I mean, it really is just the tip of the iceberg. But as far as how this went installation-wise, it went very well. Everything seems to work the way it's supposed to. The update manager fired itself right up. I was able to install updates. Everything worked the way it should have with no major problems. And that's pretty much the experience that I've had with all of the Linux Mint flavors I've looked at so far. The installation works great, and as long as you check the box that says install third-party codecs and software, you're going to get all of that pre-installed, ready to rock and roll on your system as soon as you boot it up, which is cool. Now that's different from the way Linux Mint had been in the past, whereas it depended on which ISO image you downloaded, whether you got those tools or not, and they've pretty much just put a switch in there. So if you don't want them or you can't have them for whatever reason, just don't check that box. If you do end up installing it without checking that box, you can also go back and do it again on the welcome menu. There's a place to do that as well. Linux Mint 18 has proven itself to be somewhat problematic on some hardware. This is true of Ubuntu 16.04 as well. I have had several clients who have come to me and they've wanted to install Linux Mint 18, and we have run into some driver issues, especially with AMD graphics cards. Whereas it works perfectly well on Linux Mint 17.3, it will not work on Linux Mint 18 as well. So that is an issue to take into account. And that just simply has to do with the fact that AMD does not have graphics drivers yet for Ubuntu 16.04, and whether they will or not, I don't know. They're saying to use the open source versions. I usually end up using the open source versions anyway, but even when I do, the problem that I have had with Linux Mint 18 is that on some AMD systems, when you try to boot it up, you just won't get a desktop. It just won't load, and there's really no way around that. So on a couple of occasions, I have installed Linux Mint 17.3 because I knew it would work. So therefore, if you are not going to have AMD hardware issues, if you are not going to run into the dreaded network manager problem that is part of Ubuntu 16.04, then you're going to be okay. So if everything works, it's going to work just fine, and you can proceed with it. But if you end up testing Linux Mint 18 and you find that it doesn't work and you really want to use Linux Mint, then I would suggest going ahead and downloading 17.3 that is still supported, and you can just install it and make sure that you update it. You will have to manually update the kernel in Linux Mint 17.3. My latest testing is that the latest Ubuntu kernel 4.4-036 seems to work just fine. In Linux Mint 17.3, I've upgraded a lot of machines myself to that and had no major problems. So you can have the latest kernel. You will not get some of the latest applications, but Linux Mint 17.3 is extremely stable, and it works very, very well. And as a matter of fact, the video that I'm doing right now is being recorded on a host machine that's running on Linux Mint 17.3. So there you go. It is my thoughts on Linux Mint 18, the KDE edition. It is a very nice desktop. It is a great distribution to play with if you want to learn more about KDE, or if you're a KDE fan. Like I said, though, just beware, there are a few little hardware conflicts out there that you have to deal with, and if you're not affected by any of those, then it should work perfectly fine. So thank you for watching the video. I sure do appreciate it. We will do something again soon. Don't forget, coming up here, that we have another installment of Beginner's Guide to the Desktop. We're going to be looking at file managers. That should come up in the next couple of days. Check out Easy Linux on the web. Check it out on Facebook. And if you would, give it a like if you look at it on Facebook. Also, check out freedompenguin.com for lots of groovy articles about Linux. And thank you for watching this video.